Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. You know, we're still following the story of Bill Barr and Donald Trump ousting the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Geoffrey Berman. And there's been some reporting recently where I've heard folks say, well, listen, based on the facts and the evidence that we know, there doesn't seem to be any one big case or one big legal development in the U.S. Attorney's office in New York that would have prompted this firing of Geoff Berman. And that may very well be the case. The sort of cold facts might suggest that there's no one case that has had some blockbuster development that would have prompted Bill Barr and Donald Trump to fire the top prosecutor, Geoff Berman. But here's the thing, folks. The cold facts tell us something, but they never tell us everything. You have to draw reasonable inferences from those facts to try to figure out what's really going on here. You know, as a prosecutor, basically what I did was I investigated cases in the grand jury and I tried cases before trial juries. And I would develop the facts together with my law enforcement agents in the grand jury and at trial as best I could, but the law says that you get to draw reasonable inferences from the facts. For example, to prove intent or motive. What is it that prompted somebody to do what they did? Let me give you a hypothetical. Let's assume you see me sitting here with a pen and I'm trying to write something and I'm going like this and then I throw the pen. The pen ends up hitting somebody off camera. Second hypothetical, you find out that I was having an argument with a person off camera right before the camera started rolling, and I sat down and I picked up this pen and I threw it and I hit the person. In the first hypothetical, you might infer from the facts that I was getting frustrated that the pen didn't work, it had run out of ink, and I threw it and I accidentally or inadvertently hit somebody with the pen. I didn't intend to hit them with the pen. In the second hypothetical, you might say, yeah, you were angry, you sat down and you picked up that pen and you threw it and you hit that person because you had been having an argument with them. Basically the same cold facts, but you would draw different inferences based on all the circumstances. With that in mind, let's take a look at what we have learned about the Bill Barr, Donald Trump firing of Geoff Berman just over the last 24 hours. We learned, first of all, that this was no ordinary firing because Bill Barr first had a conversation with Geoff Berman where he offered him the job of chief of the civil division of the whole Department of Justice. That's a huge job. As compared to the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, which is one of 94 U.S. Attorney's offices, the chief of the entire civil division of the Department of Justice is a far bigger job. More people, more responsibility. You know, I don't want to call it a promotion because they're both really consequential jobs, but it's certainly not a demotion. Most people would say, boy, that's a huge promotion to go from U.S. Attorney of one of the 94 U.S. Attorney's offices to chief of the entire civil division of the entire Department of Justice, covering all 94 U.S. Attorney's offices. Geoff Berman said, I don't want the job. Bill Barr apparently also offered him to be chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC. Again, enormous job, huge responsibility, huge agency, a far bigger job than being U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. And Geoff Berman said, I don't want the job. So then, in the attempted Friday night massacre memo, Bill Barr announces Geoff Berman has decided to resign. He'll be leaving the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. Geoff Berman promptly issues his own press release. I have not resigned. I am not resigning. I don't intend to resign. And so Bill Barr, being caught in that lie the next day, says, yeah, well, then I told Donald Trump to fire you and consider yourself fired. Get out. So that is a tornado of desperation by Bill Barr to get Geoff Berman out as the top prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. And it's fishy as all get out, even just based on those cold facts. But what should we infer based on the other facts and circumstances? What did we learn in recent days about what was percolating at the Southern District of New York? Well, we learned from John Bolton's book. John Bolton, unpatriotic profiteer though he may be, we learned from his book that Donald Trump had told the president of Turkey, President Erdogan, that this criminal case against a Turkish-owned bank, Halk Bank, that was up and running in the Southern District of New York. Donald Trump, we learned, told President Erdogan, as soon as I can get Obama's people out of the Southern District of New York and install my own people, I'll take care of that case for you. I mean, that's corruption writ large, right? Presidential crime, corruption, misconduct, abuse. That's what we learned in recent days. So when we consider that information and we realize that not only did Bill Barr and Donald Trump desperately tried to oust Geoffrey Berman as the top prosecutor in New York, he nominated a guy named Jay Clayton, who was the chairman of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, to come in and be the top prosecutor in the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. Jay Clayton never having spent one day in his life as a prosecutor. Let's talk about who Jay Clayton is and what we can infer from all of these facts and circumstances. So Jay Clayton got a law degree in 1993. He clerked for a judge for a couple of years, and then he joined a law firm. And he worked in what was called the general practice group of the law firm, specializing in mergers and acquisitions and capital market offerings. He had clients like Goldman Sachs and Bear Stearns and Barclays Capital and Deutsche Bank and something called SoftBank Group and the Weinstein Group and the Pershing Square Capital Management and Valiant Pharmaceuticals, and on his client list goes. And after being a sort of high finance lawyer for years, Donald Trump decides to tap him as the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission. And he nominates him to that position, and Donald Trump says the following on January 4th of 2017 about the nomination of Jay Clayton. He says he's nominated him because, quote, we need to undo many of the regulations which have stifled investment in American businesses, close quote. And then in May of 2017, the Senate confirms Jay Clayton to be chairman of the SEC on a 61-37 vote. Well, that's who Jay Clayton is, the non-prosecutor who was named by Donald Trump to be the top prosecutor at the Southern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office. What can we reasonably infer from all of these circumstances? From the desperate tornado that was the firing of Jeff Berman, to what we learned Donald Trump had promised President Erdogan, as soon as I can get my people in at SDNY, I'll take care of that Halk Bank case. And now getting the financial wizard Jay Clayton from the SEC to be the head of the SDNY. Could it be that if Donald Trump succeeded in having Jay Clayton confirmed and installed, it's an open question because it looks like the Senate may not play nice with the president on this nomination. But if he did succeed, might Jay Clayton have come in as the top prosecutor and said, hey, somebody bring me that Halk Bank file? And might he have reviewed that file and said, hey, you know, I'm the financial genius here, all my experience representing, you know, all of these highfalutin financial firms. I see some infirmities in this case. I see some weaknesses with the theory of prosecution, and I'm thinking maybe we should deep six the Halk Bank case. I'm not saying that would happen, but are those reasonable inferences based on everything we have learned in recent days? I'll tell you what, I will leave it up to you, the jury, the American people, what reasonable inferences you would draw from Bill Barr and Donald Trump's behavior. And I have a feeling, folks, we'll be talking again tomorrow. Please stay safe.